What's up, guys? This is Will Sports, and today I'm going to be talking about week 3 of the college football season. It was a very crazy, odd week. Usually, weeks where there isn't many ranked matchups, there isn't many games that you look at on the slate and say, "Hey, I want to watch that one." Is when we have the craziest weeks. Last week was definitely one of those weeks. Not a lot of games that people were necessarily very excited to watch. There were no ranked versus ranked games. The top matchups of the week were games like Tennessee and Florida, Colorado and Colorado State, just because of the Dion, hype there. LSU and Mississippi State, Washington and Michigan State, Penn State, Illinois. But these aren't really great games. We kind of knew who were going to win all these games. So it was a week where it was going to test a lot of the top teams' focus and their how well coached they are, because there's a lot of games where teams could be potentially looking ahead. Teams aren't taking their opponent very seriously, and we saw that everybody, almost every elite team I can think of, struggled. There was a few that didn't. Washington came to mind. I will be talking about them in this video. Ohio State finally got their offense rolling and looked like the Ohio State we expected them to be. Looked like the Ohio State offense we've come accustomed to seeing. And, LSU looked pretty good. But other than that, there was a lot of teams struggling. The Pac-12 teams look good too, but there was a lot of teams struggling. So I think everyone kind of just didn't come out to play their best game this week. The first game I want to talk about, though, I want to talk about Georgia. Georgia, we haven't really learned much about this season because they haven't played anybody. So this week was kind of their first somewhat real test. South Carolina's not a great team, but it's a team that, is in the SEC, a team that can hang with them a little bit. The first two opponents were Ball State and UT Martin. Those teams were never going to be able to play with Georgia. South Carolina gave Georgia a game, though. In the first half, Georgia's offense really, they didn't have the ball much. South Carolina did a good job of limiting Georgia's possessions, but Georgia's offense is not very explosive. And Carson Beck is a game-managing type of quarterback. He's not a difference maker at the quarterback position. And it showed. Georgia's offense they have 458 total yards by the end of the game. But in the first half, they were held to 3 points by South Carolina. Spencer Rattler was willing and dealing in that first half, and South Carolina, has some momentum, and it felt like they could actually pull it off. Georgia, just the life in the building was not there, and it was a very lackluster first half by them. And it was very concerning just because, like I said, the lack of explosiveness in the offense, they weren't getting any big plays. They were having to work their way down the field. The red zone offense looked, sputtery. It just was not at an elite level yet. In the second half, they cleaned a lot of that up, and they were able to dominate in that second half. They outscored South Carolina 21-0 in that second half. Rattler was getting pressured a lot. South Carolina's offensive line is really bad, and he just didn't have much time to make things happen. And Georgia kind of took advantage of that. They had 269 through the air, 189 on the ground. This is an offense that, like I said, is a work in progress. It was good to see in the second half, see them do what they were doing, but I think for them to win a national championship again, they need this offense to get going. So, and that's going to be around Carson Beck. Can Carson Beck be the difference maker? Can he consistently make the throws that they need? I don't think they're going to need too much out of him, but they're going to need more than they got Saturday. I think a lot of these screen passes and short, passes to the sideline and just let your playmakers do everything. That's cute against, bad opponents, but when you get against the elite of the elite, I think they're going to have to do more. So I think Georgia's offense is still work in progress. I want to see more down the field type of plays. I want to see burst in this offense. I want to see more tempo. I just want to, I think when you look at a team like Georgia and with the new clock rules and how the clock doesn't stop after a first down, you run a methodical, slow-paced offense that takes 14, 15 plays to get down the field to score, you are more susceptible to upsets because you're kind of playing into the less talented team's, hand, because they want to keep the game, lower scoring, because that means one possession here could make the game tighter than before. If the game's, a 10-point, 7-point game in the fourth quarter, maybe you start to, as Georgia, feel a little more jittery because the game's closer. So I think Georgia has got to figure those things out. I think they'll be fine, though, because, like I said, their schedule is very soft. I don't see anybody on their schedule that can challenge them. Tennessee was the one team coming into the year that people said maybe, but I'll get to Tennessee next. Actually, they're not gonna be able to play with Georgia. Don't have the explosive offense. The same explosive offense that they had last year to be able to play with Georgia, in my opinion. So I think Georgia will be fine in the regular season, but I think if they do make the playoff, if they get to the SEC title game, they're gonna have to fix a lot of that. Let me move on to Tennessee. Like I said, they played at Florida, and this was one of the bigger games of the weekend. I picked Florida in this game because Tennessee never wins in the swamp. And I felt like it was an easy upset pick because Tennessee did not look good last week against Austin Peay. And this week, it was Joe Milton's first true road start of the season at Tennessee. And it was just not good. Now, his stat line doesn't look that bad. He went 20 of 34 for 287 yards, 2 touchdowns. But the real problem is that his accuracy and his decision-making is a problem. The interception he threw was just ridiculous. He was getting pressured and he was getting sacked, but it was one of those plays where you just have to take the sack, bro. Like, yeah, just take the sack. It's better than putting the ball in harm's way. He threw it up down the field right to a Florida defender. I don't know what he was doing there, but Tennessee's offense was slow poking in that first half, and Florida fed off. I mean, they scored on their first drive, but Florida from there just took off, and they ended up having a 26-7 lead at half. Tennessee's defense was terrible. The tackling was horrible. Miscommunications, lack of effort. Florida was getting whatever they wanted. They had 183 yards on the ground. Travis Etienne's brother, I forget his first name, I'm sorry, but he had 172 himself on the ground, and Graham Mertz didn't have to do much. He just managed the game, was just completing a lot of short passes, just not putting the ball in harm's way. But Florida just looked like the better team in this game, and obviously being at home, having a crowd on your side helps, but Tennessee's a team that I just felt was a little bit overrated coming into this game. Just because, like I said, Joe Milton is a talented guy. He has a lot of talent. But especially his arm is incredible. He has a strong arm, but his accuracy isn't the best. Pocket presence, and just decision making. All those things are issues with him, and I just felt like it's a big drop off from Hendon Hooker. They looked good to end the season last year, so people were gonna feel good about Tennessee. And they're still a good team, but they're not an elite team this year like they were last year. This offense is not going to be as high-powered as it was last year because of that. And the defense is still really bad. And they didn't face teams the first 2 weeks that could really challenge their defense, but Florida was the first real opponent that could somewhat do that, and Tennessee just looked really bad. And their schedule, does not get any easier. They have to go to Alabama, and they have Georgia coming up soon. And they have a feisty UTSA team coming up this week. I would not be surprised if UTSA kept that game close, but a lot of work to do there. And at the end, it was just very, you had a scuffle between the two teams. Obviously, these teams are rivals. They don't like each other. So, there's no place for that. Tennessee called an unnecessary timeout that kind of led to that. We got to be smarter there. But good win for Florida. Week 1, they didn't look good against Utah. Bounced back really well this week. And if you're a Florida fan, you got to feel confident that, with the SEC East outside of Georgia is pretty wide open. Missouri looks good, but Kentucky's been iffy to start the season. South Carolina, we've seen the problems in 2 of their big games of all the problems that they have. Vanderbilt's never good, and Tennessee doesn't look as good as a lot of people thought they were going to be in for preseason. So it's wide open in that SEC East. So we'll see how they perform going forward. Next game I want to move on to. This was probably the most exciting game of the weekend. Colorado State at Colorado. Deion Sanders and Colorado have been getting extreme hype all year, and probably the most hype they've gotten all year coming into this game. Is College game day was there. Big Noon Kickoff was there. A lot of other things were there. It just felt like everybody was in attendance. Celebrities pulled up to this game, and it was a game that Colorado was expected to win by a lot. Well, that didn't necessarily happen. Colorado State came out prepared. Jay Norvell obviously got them fired up, got Colorado fired up. And Deion Sanders, he was talking about how he takes his hat and his glasses off, and Deion took that personal. And Colorado State, though, came out and they held their own. This game was pretty tight. the entire way, and Colorado State looked like the better team, honestly. Most of the way they were up. I think 28-17 late third quarter before Colorado obviously made their comeback. But this is a CSU offense that was moving the ball. They were basically running the same play, and it was that little drag route. And Colorado's defense was just allowing that over and over and over. And CSU was taking it because, hey, if we're going to get, free 5 to 6 yards on first down, and then we can just run right through your defensive line the next 2-3 plays, I mean, sure, we'll do that. We'll take it. We'll be patient and take what y'all are giving us. And Colorado's defense was the real issue in this game. And their entire front on both sides of the ball just did not look good. And this is not a great Colorado State team. And Colorado's getting pushed around. They weren't getting much up front. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't stop anything Colorado State wanted to do. And it was very concerning. Colorado State also had 17 penalties. So they were shooting themselves in the foot. And they were getting off the field on third down defensively against Colorado. They forced Colorado into a 13 third down percentage. So they had a good game plan, I felt like. And they had, came out there and played with an edge. And, they were the underdog by a lot. Nobody expected them to play like that. But they came out and took care of business and handled themselves well. Colorado, meanwhile, like I said, they didn't look great. Shiloh Sanders had that early pick six, though, that kind of got the crowd into it. And it felt like that was just the beginning of like Colorado, putting it on them. But Colorado State hung on tough throughout the whole game. Shedeur Sanders, I can't say much about him. I mean, he's just amazing. I mean, his poise and his accuracy on a lot of those throws. He was making some really tight window throws. He was getting pressured, and he was making throws right on the dot. And in high pressure situations, like I said, because Colorado was down, and it felt like the world was, it just felt like the world was on their shoulders because of all the hype and all the expectations based off, the Dion hype and how they performed their first two games and all the people that showed up for this game and tuned in. It just felt like there was so much pressure on their shoulders, and they weren't handling it well for three quarters, but Shedeur remained patient, took what the defense was giving them, and late in that game just made every play that was needed. And their receivers are very talented, obviously, and their receivers also made plays late in that game. And the defense was not great, but they held. They got a few stops late in that game when they needed, and Colorado took advantage of that. Colorado was able to force overtime. Shedeur was 38-47. He had 348 yards and 4 touchdowns, continuing his Heisman case as of right now. And in overtime, Colorado just, looked like the much better team, and took control of the game. So I got to give Colorado credit. They're 3-0. I know they did not look great. This is a game they should have won by more. They haven't beaten anyone great, but TCU is a good team, I would say still. I don't think TCU is a terrible team or anything. So that was an impressive win still. Nebraska, good defense, on that team, and it's a rivalry game, a lot of hype. They went out there, dominated, and this game right here, they were resilient. They didn't play their best football. It looked ugly for three quarters, but they got their shit together and they closed it out well. So as much as people want to hate on Colorado, saying all this hype is unwarranted, they're 3-0, and you can't deny that this is an entertaining team, because the same people shitting and hating on Colorado are the same people that cannot stop watching them and turn their game on immediately as soon as it starts. So you got to give Dion credit for having his guys ready, to play when they were down, and keep believing in them and keep having faith in them. And Shedeur for making the plays that he made. And Colorado, like I said, didn't play their best game, but they still won. And the next few weeks are going to be very interesting versus Oregon and USC. I'm very concerned about them up front and if they'll be able to hang. But as long as you have a guy like Shedeur Sanders, you have a shot in any game, I think. So it'll be interesting to see. But that is all I have to say about Colorado. Next, I want to move on to Alabama. They were playing at South Florida, a game that we thought everybody thought they were going to win by a lot. They didn't. This game was ugly, and it got called out for a delay. So it was, I think, mid-second quarter when it got called out for a delay. USF was in this game, firmly in this game. They had a 3-0 lead going into the half. But Bama just, they just did not look good. It felt like it was more just Bama being terrible than USF being good. They started Tyler Buckner. And they also play Ty Simpson in this game. Those two combined for 107 passing yards. 107 passing yards. Jalen Milroe has to be the starting quarterback for this team going forward. Like, I get he has his flaws and he's not a perfect quarterback, but he is just significantly more talented than both those guys. Better arm, better runner, and he could just do more for this offense. He's gonna make this offense more dynamic. They were able to lean on their run game. They got 203 yards on the ground, but the offense was very stagnant. They went 5 for 15 on third down and only had 4.8 yards per play. They're going to have to fix a lot, and I think the first thing starts with starting Jalen Milroe. I know Saban wanted to experiment, and South Florida's not a great team, so I guess that's why he just decided, hey, let me just throw these guys out here for this game, see how they look. Well, I think now he knows those aren't the guys that I need to look towards. Jalen Milroe against Texas was not great, but he wasn't terrible either. He made a lot of really good plays in that game that kept Alabama alive in that game. And like I said, he has an arm. He's talented. He just does it. It's the mental aspect of the game that needs to get better. But I think the more time he plays, the better that'll get. And Saban needs to nurture him and get him there. Well, I don't think you should be taking him out and putting him in and out the lineup. I think just firmly having him as your starter is the way to go. And I think Saban will make that adjustment because now they get SEC play. They play Ole Miss this week. They're going to need him for that. So I think this game was kind of necessary to see that, hey, Jalen Milroe's our best bet. Let's start him. But it was a very ugly performance from Alabama. Just felt like something I've never seen from Alabama. I mean, in the Saban tenure, like that was the ugliest game I've watched them play. Under Saban against a really bad team. South Florida is not a good team, and they gave South Florida life. And South Florida was down a possession in the fourth quarter. They were driving too. They had a chance to tie the game, but their quarterback Brown threw a crazy pass down the field into double coverage, and that kind of ended the game because Alabama went down and scored a ticky-tack touchdown that added to the score. But this game was really a 10-3 football game. But Bama has a lot of work to do, and they're going to have to get that passing game going, and they're going to have to find a quarterback that works for them. But their run game looks good, and their defense looks great. So those are great. I just think it comes down to quarterback play. I still feel very confident that this team can win the SEC West. LSU seems like the only challenger, but everyone else in the SEC West is very mediocre, in my opinion. I mean, Ole Miss has looked solid, to be fair, but with Ole Miss, I got to see it to believe it because they haven't, they were lucky to come out that Tulane game with a win because Tulane didn't have their starting quarterback. But I think Alabama will be fine as long as they start Jalen Milroe. Let's move on. I want to talk about Washington. Washington was the most impressive team of the weekend. Michael Penix Jr. is just a great quarterback. Michael Penix, through 3 games, he has thrown for 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns, 1 interception, 74% completion percentage. Right now, it's between him, Shedeur, and Caleb for that Heisman. All 3 of them have just been absolutely spectacular. It's so hard to decipher who's been the best. That's why these games that these guys play against each other is going to be so important. But Washington outgained Michigan State 713 yards to 261 yards. Complete and utter domination. And this is a Washington team that has not looked bad all season. It's only been 3 games, but all 3 games they completely dominated their opponent. They have not let up. And that is something that's very impressive because, like I said earlier, everyone else has had their bumps and their lumps along the road and have not played their best football. But Washington is not doing that. They're taking care of business. And their defense did not look spectacular through the first 2 games, but in this game, it looked stellar. And they just made a complete mockery of Michigan State. And obviously, this is a Michigan State program that's going through a lot right now with Mel Tucker and him being suspended. I wonder if that kind of played a role in Michigan State's lack of just success to do anything in this game. Their quarterback, Noah Kim, was 12 of 31 for 136 yards and an interception. He was terrible. Michigan State's offense couldn't move at all, couldn't do anything. And very early in this game, you could just tell Washington was the much better team, was going to win this game by a lot. Washington could have won this game by a lot more. They won 41-7, but that's just because the second half, they weren't really trying to do much more. I mean, they were up 35-0 at half. They didn't have to do much. I mean, they had the game under control, but this is a team with great receivers. Probably, I mean, they're right there with Ohio State as far as receivers. They have one of the best receiving cores in college football. They had two receivers go for over 100 yards, Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk. Michael Penix's deep ball is amazing, but he's spreading the ball around. He's making accurate throws, making the right reads, and his pocket presence is amazing. He's just a great quarterback overall, and I think his draft stock just continues to rise. I buy this Washington team a lot. Right now, there's very few teams I would pick ahead of Washington, just like in terms of beating them. If I had to rank them, I'd rank them sixth in the country just because they don't have a marquee win yet, like LSU, like Texas and Florida State do. But if they were playing those teams, I would pick Washington to beat those teams just because the way they look, the passing game, they look so unstoppable. I mean, Michael Penix, if he's going to be this accurate and their receivers are going to be able to create separation as well as they are and get down the field as well as they are, I just don't see how you stop it. I think the play calling by Kalen DeBoer in their offensive coordinator has been stellar all season. I buy this Washington team, and I think we're going to learn a lot more about them as Pac-12 play starts because the Pac-12 is so loaded at quarterback this year, and just in general. I mean, there's 8 top 25 teams in the conference, so they're going to face a lot of tough tests, and we're going to learn even more. But I think this team's going to be one of those teams that comes out the Pac-12 and makes that conference championship game. Michael Penix has been stellar, and they look great in every facet of the game right now. Like I said, their defense can still improve, but it will over time. But I think with the way their offense is playing, it's going to be hard to outscore them and beat them. Let's move on. Florida State. What an ugly game. They got, they were up 31-10 in this game. They looked like they were going to be fine. I mean, they didn't start the game out well, but then in the second quarter, it kind of just, gained a little bit of momentum and started to look like the Florida State we expect. They were up 31-10, like I said. Boston College, from that point on, ended up scoring 19 unanswered points and had a chance to drive down the field and win the game. Florida State's defense in that second half completely lost their focus, and it just seemed like the team was looking ahead to Clemson this week and not being that focused on Boston College. It was not a perfect weather conditioning type of game. It was a lot of wind. It looked like there was some showers pouring down. And it's a game at noon up in Boston against a Boston College team that no one thinks is that good. Florida State just did not look focused. And this is a Boston College team that when I was watching this game, I'm just like, man, how many penalties can a team have? I mean, and a lot of them were pre-snap penalties where it's just like, what are you doing? It's just bad football. Boston College was trying to lose this game, trying their hardest, and yet Florida State still managed to let them stay in the game. I think there's a lot of work to do. The defense is not as good as people think. I mean, LSU got beat pretty bad, but that's because Florida State's offense took over that game, and Florida State's defense played well in the second half of that game. But in the first half of that game, LSU was able to move the football, and LSU was doing, getting whatever they wanted. This game, you saw Boston College moving the football. They outgained Florida State in the game. They outgained them 457-340. They got whatever they wanted. 305 through the air, 152 on the ground, 6.1 yards per play, and 4 or 5 on fourth down. Boston College is not a good offense. This is not a good team. Jeff Hafley has been a guy that a lot of people want fired there, and yet Florida State made Boston College, look like a respectable team. And I just think that there's a lot of work to do. And like I said, it could be just that one game where you're looking ahead and you just kind of have a snooze fest of a game. But there is a lot of work to do as far as just figuring out what they're going to do defensively in that secondary because, like I said, they were getting gashed. They were getting gashed up front, too. And Florida State's defensive line has been probably the main strength of their defense, but in this game, it didn't look like it. They weren't locked in my opinion. And that's on Mike Norvell and that coaching staff for not having those guys ready to play or not having them being focused for a full 4 quarters. But there was flashes from their this team throughout the game, like I said, where they were dominant because they didn't start the game off well. Boston College early in that game had momentum, but Florida State outscored them. I think it was 31-3 after getting down a touchdown early, and then you let Boston College score 19 unanswered. So a lot of work to do as far as just staying focused, but they have Clemson this week, and I think they're going to be, definitely very focused for Clemson because Clemson has beaten them 6 and 7 years in a row. So, and that's the standard in the ACC, at least for right now, until someone knocks them off. So it'll be interesting to see that game. But Florida State, not their best showing, but still a very good team with a lot of potential. I think that they should improve off of that. That should be a wake-up call for them. And like I said, Clemson this week, Clemson's not great, but Clemson has their number, and Dabo Swinney and that Clemson team, I don't think they're going to come out and not play their best football. I think you're going to see the best Clemson possible. And Clemson's offense the last 2 weeks has gained a little bit of rhythm, albeit worse competition than they played in week 1. They have started to figure things out a little bit, so it'll be a tough test for Florida State, but it'll be a fun game to watch nonetheless. Let's move on. I want to recap 2 other games real quick, and I'm going to head out. LSU and Penn State both had impressive wins. LSU was very dominant. They shut down Mississippi State, and Jaden Daniels had a great performance. He went 30 of 34, 361 yards and 2 touchdowns. Malik Neighbors had himself a game with 239 yards through the air. This LSU team looks like they should. Florida State took a lot of life out of that, fan base. A lot of LSU fans had doubts going forward, but they rebounded pretty well this week against Mississippi State. And like I said, just a complete dominant showing. They got whatever they wanted offensively, and they outgained Mississippi State 530 to 201. And their defense looked like you wanted it to look. And Jaden Daniels, if he's going to be that efficient with the ball and spreading it around and just making the right play every time, LSU can run the table. I mean, they're that good. They're talented. The Florida State game was just, like I said, they got beat up front in that second half, and it seemed like Florida State just gained some momentum and just would not relinquish that momentum. And Jaden Daniels also just didn't have his best game against Florida State, but he looked locked in this one. Malik Neighbors was a problem. Harold Perkins was a problem. LSU, I still think they're very talented. Brian Kelly, at the end of the day, is a really good coach. Despite what people wanted to say after the Florida State game, he's still a really good coach. And I didn't think LSU was just gonna fall into this abyss and not be good all year. They're still a 10 win team type of level. So this was a good, sign for them going forward that, hey, we lost week 1, but we're going to correct that. We're going to be focused, and we're going to turn our season around. And last week was a great, sight to see. And this week they have Arkansas coming up, and Arkansas is coming off a loss to BYU, where they completely outplayed BYU in terms of, yardage and everything, but just shot themselves in the foot with a lot of miscues and missed opportunities. So LSU should win that game pretty comfortably, but it's going to be interesting to see how LSU performs going forward. Like I said, them and Alabama meet later in the season. Both had early season losses, but I could see both those teams being in a good position heading into that game. So and also Penn State, they won at Illinois 30-13. Not a pretty offensive showing. Drew Allar had his worst game of the season, only 16 of 33, 208 yards. But their defense forced 5 turnovers, and Illinois was terrible. Luke Altmaier is not a good player, and Illinois just, bad, really bad. But Penn State took advantage of it. Didn't need to do much offensively if your defense is going to force 5 turnovers, a lot of which led to shorter drives. And their run game looked pretty good in this game as well. They rushed for 164 yards. They have a dual back system that they run, so they got several guys that they can lean on in the running game. So I expect that to stay the same. But Drew Allar has looked impressive so far this season, but did not look his best this game. I hope that's just a one-game thing for them, because I think for Penn State, the real difference in them this year, to me so far, seemed like the quarterback play. Drew Allar seems like a really good quarterback who can make a lot of really big, on point throws that certain quarterbacks in the past can make, and it's added an element to their offense that they haven't had. So if he's gonna, play well, Penn State can beat anybody because they have the talent on the defense to be elite, and they have a great run game. So it's just gonna be up to their passing game. So it didn't look pretty against Illinois, but Illinois is not a team that could really challenge them, make them sweat. So it didn't matter. But when they face Ohio State, when they face Michigan, I want to see an improvement in that passing game. And I think they'll have some tune-up games, some games that kind of get them going. Iowa's a good defense, so this week they'll be tested. If Drew Howard looks good in that one, that'll move me, because this is an Iowa defense that, hey, their defense continuously has been elite. Every year, Iowa's defense is elite. So it'll be tough pickings against them, but we'll see how they perform. But it was a great week of football. Love college football so much. Every week is great, but just a lot of chaos, a lot of madness going on, mayhem. And I think when you look at the slate of games that we have this weekend, we're going to learn a lot about a lot of teams. We have Colorado, Oregon, Florida State, Clemson, Iowa, Penn State, Ohio State, Notre Dame. I don't know why I didn't name that. That is a huge game, one of the biggest games of the season. UCLA, Utah, Oregon State, Washington State. So we're going to get a lot of big games this weekend, and we're going to learn a lot about a lot of these teams. So I can't wait. And yeah, this is my analysis about everything. I hope y'all enjoyed, and I will be uploading some NFL videos probably later in the day or sometime this week. So yeah, stay tuned for that. But yeah, that's all I have to say. It's been Will Sports. Peace.